The other day, the second 60th anniversary special aired, Wild Blue Yonder, and if you've seen my initial reactions to it, you'll know I'm a pretty big fan for a multitude of reasons. So much so that I fully intend on giving it its own full review at some point in the future. However, in this video, I want to focus on one specific scene and how it not only could tell us what RTD is planning for the future of Doctor Who, but also how he could perhaps salvage some of the less than beloved work of his predecessor. Also subscribe if you're new, we make regular Doctor Who videos here on the channel and any support is greatly appreciated. So the scene I'm talking about is a scene in particular where the Doctor, spoilers, confronts a fake version of Donna Noble who has the knowledge of not only Donna Noble herself, but seems to have knowledge that she shouldn't have, pertaining to the Doctor's life in the 15 years since Donna Noble met him. The reason fake Donna gives for this is that when the Dr. Donna came back, she was able to see all the memories of the Doctor since they'd last met. Now, it's unclear whether the actual Donna has this. It's left rather ambiguous at the end of the episode, but this leads to a very interesting conversation where Donna mentions directly the Flux and, more indirectly, the Timeless Child. Two plot lines that are, let's just say, controversial among the fanbase. And what this episode decides to do with them is very, very interesting. First, though, I probably should give a brief explainer of both Flux and Timeless Child to people who are new to Doctor Who, perhaps jumping back on board after years away and are like, what is all this stuff about Flux and Timeless Child? For the uninitiated, the Timeless Child is a storyline devised by previous showrunner Chris Chibnall that attempts to rewrite the Doctor's history so that he was not in fact a Time Lord from the planet Gallifrey, but instead a foundling found at a portal at the edge of the universe, who the Time Lords took and stole regeneration off of, and essentially built Time Lord society from. This plotline was hugely controversial for changing so many aspects of Doctor Who lore and history. A particular subset of fans got mad at the idea of pre-Hartnell Doctors, i.e. the first incarnation of the Doctor we knew up until that point, but for myself, I was more frustrated at how it made the Doctor so central to the universe and the founding of one of the universe's greatest forces. It makes the Doctor Who universe, in my opinion, feel somewhat smaller than it would otherwise be. I like the Time Lords being this mysterious, unknowable entity, as they were in some classic stories, particularly the War Games. This whole idea of the Doctor being the centre of everything, I dislike, and I still dislike it to this day. This is not coming from someone who particularly likes a lot of the story arcs that Chibnall did. However, I do really like how RTD's approached them. As for the Flux was the central storyline of the 13th series of Doctor Who prior to the season renumbering thing. I know it gets confusing. And also not to be confused with season 13, which was the classic Who season 13. You get it. That saw, in the simplest terms, the creation of the Flux to wipe out the universe in order to get rid of the Doctor, as it was created by her adopted mother from the Timeless Child arc, Tech Tayun. There's a bunch of other stuff that goes on in that series that I really don't have time to digest, and to be honest, I'm not sure I fully understand what was going on in that series, but that's the gist of it. And it's left rather ambiguous at the end of Series 13 whether or not Flux destroyed half the universe, as was kind of depicted on screen, with many people decrying that actually it all made perfect sense, you've just got to watch it. In reality, I think the case was, it just wasn't very well resolved and left a lot to be desired. But what I find super fascinating about this is that RTD took this plotline that wasn't really wrapped up satisfyingly for the audience, and wasn't even that beloved by the audience, and recontextualizes it into the Doctor's journey. Now, the Doctor is running from the sins of destroying half the universe and is genuinely distraught at having brought about that much destruction. Something which, frankly, the previous Doctor didn't really seem too bothered about. This, to me, makes the Flux development far more interesting than it otherwise would have been. It essentially acts as a new version of the Time War for this new RTD2 era. Much like with that, the Doctor does something catastrophic and bad to the world or to the universe of Doctor Who, and is kind of having to live with those repercussions and with that guilt. The way it differs from the Time War in a really interesting way, though, is that arguably it's far worse here, because with the Time War, the chances are that if he hadn't have done what he did, many other planets could have been destroyed in the fallout. Whereas with this, the universe, from the Doctor's perspective, was actively destroyed because of someone who didn't like them. And considering the Doctor has such a massive love for the universe and all of creation, as he spent the better part of 3,000 years exploring it, that's naturally going to leave an impact on it. With the Timeless Child, the reference is a lot more subtle. Donna essentially says that you're not actually from Gallifrey, you don't know where you're from. And we get a lovely scene towards the end of the episode where he basically just said, a lot has happened since I last saw you, and that's it. So this implies to me that the Timeless Child, whilst it's not being retconned, is essentially being treated as kind of a mystery, this unknowable thing that won't really be addressed. The mystery of the Doctor, the origin of the Doctor, something we're not going to delve into again, but it adds texture and flavour to the character. Now, I've gone on record saying I don't like the Timeless Child conceptually for a myriad of reasons, but if Russell just intends to leave the Doctor's origins pretty much ambiguous going forward, I'm all for that. I mean, in a Doctor Who annual, it was even said that some people believe the Doctor's story started with the police box in the junkyard as we know it, and others believe it happened earlier with the Timeless Child event. So this kind of presents a have your cake and eat it too thing of where if you liked the Timeless Child development, you can fully continue to support that within the current canon of the show. If you didn't like it, it's not really mentioned explicitly enough to cause further contradictions or annoy more fans. And on the Flux thing, I would argue that it makes it significantly more interesting than it otherwise would have been. One of my core complaints with the previous era is that a lot of the time the characters are experiencing events rather passively, nothing really impacts them, and with this, we see that completely flip on its head. We see the Doctor more emotionally vulnerable than they've been probably since Capaldi, and that seems to be continuing with Ncuti Gatwa, as Russell T Davies says that he is lonely. Possibly because half the universe got wiped out Thanos style. So it seems like this could genuinely create an interesting arc of the Doctor coming to terms with just how much devastation they indirectly, admittedly, caused, because even the Doctor themselves doesn't believe they're the sole reason for it, and trying to rebuild a broken universe. That's a new thing for this show, and I genuinely think that could be a really good way of not only continuing the lore of the show, but at the same time building off of it and creating something new without getting bogged down in canon and lore specifics that's going to alienate new viewers. Essentially treating Chibnall Who as the Time War event that catapults us into the next 10 years. In much the same way Stephen Moffat wanted the events of the 50th to do, which didn't really pan out. If anything, they kind of just got reversed. But hey ho, what can you do? That's Doctor Who for you. Another thing that it does is essentially give all the excuse you need for a soft universe reboot. This was the same thing Stephen Moffat did in Series 5 with the cracks in time. However, with this, it's even easier. With half the universe being wiped out, you essentially have a clean slate to build new civilizations and planets off of without contradicting any previous canon. We could have the Doctor be an active part of rebuilding the universe again, which would be a great way for them to atone for their guilt. Or they can go a more personal route. After all, we know that Ruby Sunday is in fact an adopted companion according to synopsises, and with the Doctor's current crisis of self, it could create some really interesting character drama for them both to feel like they're in the same place. Once again, using something that wasn't really that well done originally to further the story. Again, I don't really like the Timeless Child as it existed within the Chibnall era. I don't really like Flux as it existed in the Chibnall era. But some of those ideas did have merit. They just weren't executed very well. One of my big complaints with the Chibnall run and the Timeless Child specifically is how it had these big changes and these big ideas that ultimately didn't really go anywhere. If you're going to make these changes to canon, which some people aren't going to like, the least you could do is do something with them. And if that involves actually giving some interesting character drama, actually building on the character of the Doctor in a way that makes sense, and in a way that also retains some of the mystery, but also furthers the character's development, I think that's a much better way to go about it, and potentially a lot more interesting than a straight retcon could ever be. There's honestly just so much potential in this idea, and I really hope it's explored further. But what do you think? Do you think it's wise for RTD to continue on these plot points, or would you rather him just completely ignore them? Whatever your thoughts are, drop them down in the comments below. Be sure to like this video if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you later.